Hello everyone, and this session is about GraphQL and Twig and how to decouple Drupal's front end with it. It's been good timing because the previous session Stefan talked a lot about GraphQL, so he made my life a bit easier. Yeah, please. Cool, so my name is Fran. I work for Amazing Labs. Basically, I mean, you've got my contact details in there, but whenever you want to look for me, it's just FG Garling. I'm almost everywhere except for Twitter, which makes it not everywhere. Today, we're going to be covering a quick intro about GraphQL, which will be brief. Then we will deep dive a little bit into the modules related to Drupal, how to install it, enable, all these sort of things. All that lays the foundation for the core of the session, which is GraphQL and Twig. And I'm just going to be showing a series of examples, some case scenarios that we're going to try to solve together with those two modules. At the end of the session, I would have explained a lot of ways to decouple, and I will just try to lay the foundation to what if we want to fully decouple the app. So I will just briefly mention what could be the steps, and then obviously time for questions in the end. So GraphQL, is there anybody that has not heard about it? That's good, it's all right. It's basically a query language for your data. That's all it is. I'm hearing already people saying SQL, SQL, SQL. We'll talk about it in a little bit. One of the greatest things of this language is that you ask for what you need, and you just get that. You don't need to get any extra information, any extra data that you just don't need. Another cool thing is that you can request multiple resources in a single request, so you can group all your queries together, saying one single request to the server, get all the data in one go. So this is just an example. We saw it before with Stefan. Basically, you just put a query together, and in this case, it's just I want an event, and I want the title, the venue name, and the city name. But I also want location, and within the location, city, country, and what's going to be the weather like. And you get exactly that, providing that the API can cater for that. I said it before, I say it again, GraphQL is not SQL. There are some tweets about it. I don't know if David is around here. But in any case, we'll see now why GraphQL is not SQL. What is really under GraphQL endpoint? Is there a database? Yeah, most likely. Is there a JSON file? Could be. Is there a MongoDB? Could be. And that's when things start to piece together. Like GraphQL is just really a definition of what your data looks like. It's not what your data is like. Okay? I can have under the hood a million different sources of data, but then with GraphQL, I'm just defining a way to expose that data towards outside. So as you can see, that's nothing like SQL could be. Okay, in SQL we have tables, we have columns, but in GraphQL you can only see what you are allowed to see. And the fact that you are querying a node entity doesn't even mean that there is a node table under the hood. It could be just a text file that is called node.txt. Under the hood, the backend just transforms the data. GraphQL tends to appear a lot with JSON API. Some people think that they are competitors. I don't think they are at all. They could serve same purposes under certain circumstances, but they could also be very different. And one of the biggest examples is going to be today. We are going to be using GraphQL not as an API endpoint. We are going to be using everything internally within Twig. It obviously appears with decouple build. It's one of the technologies you can use. You could expose your API via GraphQL and then build the front end however you want. And that's why it also appears with Apollo, React, Vue.js. but it doesn't quite often is related to twig. Just because twig in Drupal world is, again, server-side, and GraphQL, we try to think API endpoint, but that's kind of what we're going to demystify today. We can use it in a different way. So, jumping straight away into GraphQL and twig, and if we want to have it running in our Drupal project, I'm assuming some basic knowledge. I mean, in this case, we're just requiring the module as we would require any other module. So if you are not familiar with Composer, just do it in whichever other way you do. In this case, just a Composer command, just require GraphQL_twig, and that will pull all the dependencies, being GraphQL one of them, and GraphQL core as well. And as you can see in here as well, it uses under the hood a PHP GraphQL library, but the whole GraphQL, I mean, you could give loads and loads of different talks just about it, okay? That's not the purpose of this talk. Enabling the module, same old. We just enable GraphQL twig, and we need to enable GraphQL core. The reason for this is because GraphQL doesn't force you to use the schema that they define in GraphQL core. When you enable GraphQL core, that is just reading Drupal's data, creating a schema, and saying, this is all your data. But GraphQL in itself doesn't push you to that. You could define another GraphQL schema in another module of your liking, custom module, and then GraphQL twig will just read from that. That's the only reason behind it. And then this small thing, don't worry if you cannot read the code, or the slides are available online and you will have access to all of them. If you enable this in the services.yaml file, it just twig debug, just enabling twig debug, and we will see the benefits of it right now. So I'm going to jump straight into an example, and we're going to be building over that example over the next 15-20 minutes. So I've taken a template that I think we all know, node.html.twig. At some point in our lives, we've overridden it or extended it or do something with it. And even if we haven't, we know that it's in there in Drupal. It's one of the core templates from Drupal, and it just displays the markup of a node by default Drupal. Okay, so remember that I've just enabled the modules before. So just by enabling that GraphQL twig and GraphQL core, I have now the possibility of, within this template, in this bit, to put a GraphQL query, as we saw before. And then in here, I can use straight away that data. So if you see GraphQL, and I'm getting the node, and then I'm getting the title of the node. So I can just come here and say GraphQL node title, and I just added a bit of markup in there so that we could see where the title is coming from. And that would translate if we just, I mean, this is out of the box Drupal. I haven't done anything. If I just go into the node template and do that, I will get this. So we will get the standard markup from Drupal. What? Sorry, it's going to happen a lot today. But we can see this little bit in here is what that snippet of code is doing. So we are already using some of the GraphQL within twig. It's pretty much, I mean, obviously we need to override the template. We need access to the template. But I didn't need any other configuration, anything. Okay? It's a little bit stupid to bring title when we already have title. But this was just to show the example. If before you did that, enable twig config and debug, sorry, then if you just hover over the piece of markup that we brought, you will get that GraphQL icon. I don't know if you can see it. It's this tiny bit in here, just by hovering. And then if you click in it, it happens a great thing. It opens in a brand new tab, the GraphQL Explorer that we saw before with Stefan. And it is already pre-populating all the query as I had it. And you probably cannot see anything in here. Again, the slides are available. But this is the query that we are running with the parameters that we are passing with the result of that query. And that was just by clicking into that little helper icon. So this is it. I mean, I could just go down, finish, but I think we're going to give you a bit more details. And basically, we're going to expand on all the possibilities that we have with GraphQL and twig. So the biggest probably advantage of this example, of this scenario, GraphQL and Twig, is that we can extend markup. We can augment what Drupal is giving us out of the box. Drupal gives us a lot of things, so if we just go to the node template and we just query all the variables available, we can see that we have node, we have loads of other things, current user and all that. But what if there is something that it is not available in that template? This could be a really good use case. Okay, we could bring additional variables that are not in the template. So for example, just for the sake of this slide, I wanted to bring not only the title, but also how many nodes are in my site, and I will just display that. So this is my test page. In this whole site, you have 80 pages or whatever. Okay, and that will just translate into that. As easy, I just requested the data, and I just got the data. Something I didn't mention before. If you remember in the previous example, we put everything, query and markup, within the same file. This module allows you to create a separate file with the same name, node.html.twig.gql, GraphQL, and you can just put in there the query, and you don't need to do anything else in here in the node template, so you can just use it. So that it's a much cleaner approach, especially if your queries are big and all that, and you don't want to have some sort of data querying in your template. It's good. Okay, and this we just translate, as you can see in here, I'm showing this is just vanilla Drupal 8 enabled. You know that by default we have basic page and we have articles. I just edited the node template, and that means that both articles and basic pages are affected. So you can see that we are showing this title thing and these pages on the site, and this title thing and these pages on the site, but also in here we have this submitted. Then if maybe in here there are comments, we would see them as well. So it's not invasive at all. Remember that this use case is we are extending, we are augmenting, and only if we want to or if we need to. Another possibility, which is a bit more hardcore, but it's a possibility as well, is replacing markup, Drupal markup altogether. In here, if you remember, I was still using all the rest of the file as it was, so that I get the advantages of Drupal. But I could go and say, okay, I'm not going to use any of that, and I'm going to completely replace the markup. So I'm just going to stick in here GraphQL query, and I'm just going to create the markup as I want to. Basically, this is everything I've done. This approach could be cool in a non-decoupled site for smaller templates, like fields or certain blocks, of if it's a very basic node. It's not recommended to go to the page HTML or the HTML main templates, because obviously then you're losing everything that Drupal is giving you out of the box. But it would give you full flexibility of the markup and the data that you're rendering. This, and we will see it at the end, I have an example, is very close to a fully decoupled app, or it could be very close to a fully decoupled component. Remember, nowadays we don't need to fully decouple a site. We could just do like the shopping cart, or we could do any other part of the site. And even doing this, we could still use some of the advantages of Drupal. So this Drupal Inheritance for templates, we have HTML, then page, then node, then blocks, then fields. So we could fully replace one of those and still get the advantages of all the others. So it's not an option to discard, and as usual, just use it whenever it fits best. And if you have in mind to fully decouple the site, this could be a good baby step for it. So you could start fully decoupling some of the templates, until one day you say, I'm almost done, I just need to translate a little bit of Twig into React or into Vue.js, I'm nearly done. I'll show you the sample later on. I'm going to talk a little bit about preprocessing, okay? This is the sample we covered before. We want to bring the total number of nodes on a site and show it on every single node page. How would we do it with classic Drupal? Site building approach or backend approach? I could ask around, but I'm pretty sure that you guys are going to come up with something similar to this. So a site builder would say, that's easy to do. I'm going to create a view block, which we have an aggregated query on nodes, for which I just put a field, which is the count. And then that block, I can just go to the block management page, set it to visible under all the node asterisk pages, and then I can position that block above or below the main content. That would do the job of showing the total number of nodes in a site. But just look at the steps, okay? It's not bad. It's the way many of us have done it before, and probably we will do it in the future, because as usual, it all depends on budget, on needs, on everything, okay? So I'm not saying that this is a bad. I'm saying that this is another approach. A backender and frontender, they could say, okay, I could just do a pre-processed hook for the node template, put it in my thing file, and then just run a query to get the total number of nodes and pass the results of that variable to the template. And then in the template, in the twig template, I can just use that new variable. That query would look something like this. Basically, I'm just getting all the published nodes, and then I'm just passing that variable or whatever. So these are probably, without considering GraphQL and Twig, I'm pretty sure that most of us would do something similar to this. Cleaner, dirtier, but it would be something along these lines. It would be a mostly site-buildy sort of way of doing the things, or a bit more coding. We code a little bit on the back end, and then a little bit on the front end, and we're done. Same problem, exactly the same problem with GraphQL and Twig. We don't need to worry about any pre-processing, even if it's done under the hood, but we don't need to worry, which is the cool thing. The module does it for us. That's the cool and the beauty of many of the Drupal modules. They do the things for us so that we don't need to worry. Now I want to bring the total number of nodes on a site and show it on every single node page. You already know how this goes. We can just edit the template or have a separate file, even cleaner, and then just do that. Okay, I think more or less we can see the query. It just bring the count of the nodes. And then that will just show. As you can see, I'm not even filtering in there in status publish or anything like that, and that's just because GraphQL by default it will take into account Drupal permissions. So if a user is seeing the site and does not have permissions to see and publish nodes, they won't get that number. Okay, that was just the count that I showed you at the very beginning, and it's like, that's silly, that's just one piece of data. But what if now we want to bring all the available languages into that node, just because we want to implement a fancy language switcher or whatever, or we just want to say to the users, and this node is translated into 3 different languages. So we will just need to add that little query. So language, available languages, we get the name, and then we get a for loop in the Twig template. And also, what if I want all the languages, I want count of all the nodes, and what if I want also a count of users and a list of users? Why do you want that in the node template? Open your mind a little bit. We might want it somewhere, okay? And we are just talking about the possibilities of the Twig and GraphQL combination. So we could build a query like this in the node Twig template, in which we request for the node title, for the node count, for the language available, for the user's count and the user's name. We will get it all in one go, and we will have all that data available within that template, without no need for pre-processing, no need to create views or blocks or set blocks somewhere on the site or wherever. And again, I put at the very beginning the alternatives of doing just for one piece of data for the count, and the possibilities was either creating views and blocks or pre-processing hooks. Imagine that now we have all this. If we go on the classic approaches, the complexity of the problem has increased ×4, whereas in here, the complexity of the problem hasn't increased at all. I just keep on querying, and I just keep on reading that data. So this is probably one of the most powerful uses that we could give to this combination, GraphQL and Twig. As you have seen so far, I haven't mentioned API call, I haven't mentioned absolutely anything like that. We are still everything within the Drupal ecosystem, okay? We haven't come out of Drupal, we're still on the server, processing data and showing data. So, yeah, I just put in here Ant because the possibilities are just unlimited. Some people might think, what about performance? And I also want to talk about the advantages. So performance-wise, one of the things that Stefan mentioned before is that under the hood, it still uses Drupal. So it caches data, it checks all the access to the data. So if we're getting good performance out of any data that is being output into Drupal, we are still getting it with this approach. Again, I mentioned it before, everything is done in the same request. So no additional HTTP request is made. This is very important. When we go decouple, we know that at least for sure we will have one request going on. And somebody might be thinking server-side rendering. That's pretty much what's happening in here. We're rendering everything on the server and we're sending it to the client. Queries are cached. Queries are grouped within multiple templates. This is important. Before I show you one template with 4 fragments, but what if we have 10 different templates with 10 different GraphQL queries? This module would group them all together, put them into one, and just compute it all together. So we don't need to perform the same action multiple times. Remember that helper that I showed you at the beginning, that GraphQL icon? So if we were to have a page with 10 different GraphQL queries coming from different templates, I just click on that button and it will take me to the GraphQL Explorer and show all the queries in there, listed top to bottom. Yeah, I already mentioned, this is kind of server-side rendering. We are doing everything on the server and then we are sending it to the user. Advantages. And probably this is kind of in line with the disadvantages from decoupling. If somebody had done fully decouple, we know that we are losing a few things from Drupal. Forms and forms validation is one of the big things that we are losing and that we kind of need to re-implement on the front end. Translations, we are losing for quite a lot of things. And again, that's one of the good things. We get Drupal forms, we get translations, and it works alongside with everything that we have in Drupal out of the box. So again, see this as a possibility to augment your site if you are not thinking of decoupling. And if you are thinking of decoupling, think of it of baby step as a tool to help you get closer to there. The good thing is that this reduces risk. Many times when we talk decouple, it means that the budget increases, it means that the time to build a project increases, it builds that a lot of things that clients don't want to increase. And also the risk. You are coding a front-end application, you are coding a back-end application, so you are taking quite a few risks, which they are totally worth. I mean, when it makes sense decoupling, go do it. Performance-wise, I mean, it is the way to go. Building an API and expose your data so that we can have a mobile app, a website, and many other things, a fridge consuming your data, then yeah, that's great. But in this case, we're doing the same at a very reduced risk. We could be training developers into what GraphQL is, into building this kind of queries, into how can you piece the things together. With this reduced risk, what's coming in the next slides is as well an example of, imagine that you have already a kind of decouple component with GraphQL and Twig. So the next step could be that we could build that component just on React. We're still not decoupling the site. And again, the future to that, if we keep on doing that, if we have many React components, that at the end becomes a decouple app. So a very quick recap of what I've been talking in the previous slides. We can, if we want, and that's probably the best use we can give to this, we can augment the template available variables. We don't need any pre-processing. That is quite powerful. We don't need to go, we don't even need a backender. So long as the data is exposed, if somebody in React is able to be a GraphQL query and building GraphQL queries, for some of you, the very first time we say GraphQL, it's like, wow. But then once you start building queries, and with this GraphQL interface, it's so easy to build queries. It's so easy to query the data. So yeah, we don't need that much hardcore knowledge of the system to build a query for this, and we don't need pre-processing. Remember that we could have the query in the same file, or we could have it into a separate one, and that we could request any kind of data in any template. That's as well pretty cool. Sometimes clients can come to us with crazy requests and say, I want you to show rainbows and unicorns in this language switcher. You can get rainbows and unicorns so long as your GraphQL exposes it and just put it in there. We don't need any additional trips to the server to request for that data, because it's done everything on the same request. And there's no need to decouple, but if we want, it would be easy to, and it lays a foundation. I already mentioned this. So I'm just going to jump into the last part of the presentation. Is like, if you've been able to follow so long, I think we are now in a very good position to understand this, okay? Same problem, we're just bringing the name of the user in here. So we just go into a twig file, and we just query the user, and we just print it out. Easy. I know you are not going to see this by any means, so I'm just reducing it now in a little bit. I tried, my front-end React is crap, but I tried to put everything in one file. I'm used to see like everything in like a million files, and I just tried to put everything into something that makes sense. So we're importing React DOM, and then Apollo client, GQL to get the data. Then I just define the client, which is just the endpoint of my site, and I just define the query, which is exactly the same as that, but instead of using the user variable, I'm just hard coding a 1 in here. So this could be the query, and then the rest of the React app would be like Apollo provider, where I pass that client, obviously, and then this GraphQL, where I pass that query that I define there. And if everything goes well, while it's loading, I just print loading, error, error, and if everything goes well, I just print this username. I know it's a lot of code, so that's why I try to simplify in here, because if you see, at the end of the day, we are almost doing the same. We are querying GraphQL for some data, we're rendering. In here, we are doing it server-side with Twig. In here, we are doing it in a React app. You can have like 1,000 files in between, but at the end of the day, the problem we're trying to solve is the same, and the solutions look very similar. Obviously, they perform different, client-side, server-side, but again, this is not the topic of the conversation. This is so that you can see how easy it would be, easy quote, to report one Twig plus GraphQL to a React-based application with an endpoint, API, etc., etc. So yeah, that was it really. This was the end of the presentation. I've put in here as well quite a lot of resources. Some of you already know the mastermind of this GraphQL module, which is Sebastian Sensen. But also the mastermind of this GraphQL and Twig, it just came out of Plain one day, is Philip Melab. He's written a few articles about it, and also I've put in there a few videos about soft decoupling, atomic design, a presentation he did in Drupal Europe. So if you're interested in the topic, you can listen from him. He knows like way more than I do. I'm just a user of the module. He is the creator. So if you have questions about performance, about caching, about exposing data, about anything, you can reach out to him. More resources. So there are a couple of blog posts that they go like from top to bottom into use cases, which are pretty useful. And at the end of the day, also you can always go to the Drupal Slack and into that channel. There's a lot of users in there, but Philip is in there every single day, and he is very responsive when it comes to answering. Sebastian, not now. He is busy traveling the world, but he might reply to you at some point. But yeah, I mean, there are plenty of resources in there. It's a module that it's ready to be used. Again, with same as with GraphQL, the possibilities of the module, they are just as many as you want to think of. It's just a tool that you can use to extend what you already have. So that was it. I hope that you were able to follow along the whole presentation. Have you got any questions? Ruben?
Now that Dries decided to lay in favor of a JSON API, what is going to be the future of GraphQL in Drupal core?
That's a very good question, and I think it was Philip. He did an article kind of replying to that, and also one of the things they had in mind, Philip, Sebastian, and all the contributors to the module, is that they could do the same thing, but they don't exactly do the same thing. So we're talking of having Drupal as an API first, but also there is another initiative, which is the admin UI. So, for example, this could easily be done in the new theme for the admin UI. We are not talking about decoupling that part. We are talking about building a theme that consumes Drupal data. And again, this could lay the foundation. This could be a really good tool. So I don't think they are in direct competition. I think you either use GraphQL or JSON API because it really fits your needs. I mean, all the people that I know that they've used GraphQL is because they really, really needed that kind of flexibility. And they just went for it. But yeah, I don't think they are competing against each other. I think it's great to have both because, yeah, with JSON API, we could worry about the front end, and GraphQL, we could perfectly use it for the back end. Sorry, that was...
You used GraphQL version 3. What's stopping you in the version 4 of the module?
That is a session that I submitted for Drupal Dev Days in New York for decouple days. One of the biggest single feature of that module, there are many more. I'm just going to go back a few slides. GraphQL at the moment, it is full of Drupalisms. And by that, I mean the word node, the word entity, all that is really Drupal. So, yeah. You saw that in here, I needed to enable this GraphQL core. This GraphQL core, what it does is it creates the default schema reading from Drupal. And then when you go to graphical Explorer, then you get entity config or block config, and then you've got entity label, and then you've got loads of terms, like derivatives and all that are just purely Drupal. If you go to any other framework, it wouldn't make sense. So what GraphQL version 4 is trying to do, it's creating a tool to allow the users to create their own schema. So imagine that instead of calling node, you just want to call it page, and instead of or for user, instead of label, you just want to call it name. So the idea is that you create the contract first. Like imagine that as a contract. You put like these are the available things that you can query, and these are the available fields. And then you give that to the front-enders, and they can build absolutely everything. And then you give that to the back-enders, and they need to make sure that they achieve that contract. It's like telling you, I'm going to give you A, B, and C, and then you know that you're going to get A, B, and C, so you can mock data, you can do all sort of mocking in the front end and in the back end, and you know you're going to get. That's probably the biggest feature coming in version 4 of GraphQL. Stefan?
Yeah, it's like maybe it's worth mentioning that like one big difference maybe like also like with the JSON API is that like with GraphQL off the box you can't do like crop interfaces, right? So you have to write your mutations yourself.
Yeah.
The JSON API sort of like has that in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So for those of you if you didn't listen, is with GraphQL there is the concept of mutations. which basically just creating data, editing data, deleting data. Out of the box in GraphQL, we're just querying data. We're just pulling, okay? We're not pushing anything. In the early stages of GraphQL, they were including mutations, but they decided to get them out because they would just, the complexity of the module was way higher for the advantages. And basically what they say is this is a great tool for pulling, and it's very easy to extend. You will need backenders to do that. They will need to create mutations, but it's, I don't want to say dead easy, because right now, right here, I don't know how to do it, but I've been told that it's dead easy to do mutations for it. The GraphQL interface allows for that, whereas the JSON API, we get it out of the box, all sort of CRUD operations. Any more questions? Yeah?
I just wanted to share one more thing. Like, in my case study, so we built like the website first, right? And so we just like did it like Drupal way, right? So for example, like for these like cooking instructions and things, like then we provide like extra variables like the rendering arrays, like with sort of like the amount of ingredients and things like that. So then we build it up, right? And we use GraphQL, and then we figure like, okay, we need this here as well, right? So in the end, like our business logic like is the same, but like we would have completely spared like the whole like rendering part. Like if we would have known this in the first place, we would just done it like with extra fields like on the GraphQL side, and then just do the same like in our twig templates, right? So like if you ever like have a feeling that you're just going to decouple something like later on, let's better start right away like using GraphQL.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I guess all these things, it always comes with the needs, with what the client asks, with the budget initially, all these kind of things. But it's as you mentioned, if you know for sure what's going to be the final end product, then you can take a conscious decision about which modules, which technology to use. If you don't, and maybe it's something that you are agreeing with the client to build in an iterative way, then this kind of approach could give you very good tools to reach the final goal step by step. Cool. Anything else? All right then. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy.